Hello, and welcome to the Stacking Dinger Show, your home for everything Underdog MLB Best Ball. I am your host, Matthew, aka Sheep, aka Dark Sheep, and today we have an excellent episode that's sort of piggybacking on last week's episode, which, if you missed it, go check it out. We talked to Vlad Sedler, Ryan Bloomfield, and KC Bubba on fantasy digesting fantasy content, and we touched a little bit on stats and stats that they liked. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into stats this week. Of course, we have Billy, who is you've seen the last few episodes. You know, check him out at SportsVizBJ, and we have returning favorite Chris. Chris, you are here at B3isball. Welcome back. But the star of the show, sorry to skip over you, Chris. We'll talk to you later. But the star of the show this week is Thomas, otherwise known as TJStats. Welcome, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, for those who may not know, you probably have seen, if even if you don't know who Thomas is, you've probably seen some of his graphics and metrics going around on fantasy baseball Twitter, regular Twitter. So, Thomas, why don't you give us a little quick background on yourself and how you got into baseball and baseball stats?
Yeah, for sure. Again, my name's Thomas Nestico, most well known as TJ Stats. I got to the point that even my friends call me TJ Stats, that I've known for 5, 10 years. I'll just say it. But yeah, I'm a civil engineer by trade. So again, I've always loved maths and science, but I also grew up playing a whole different bunch of sports. I'm from Toronto. My dad, he vividly remembers when the Blue Jays first started. I guess their inaugural season and whatnot, and also watching the 92, 93 World Series, being there. I've never had the chance to witness a World Series, but he was able to witness two back to back. But I do remember watching them. He had the VHS tapes of the World Series, so I would sit down in front of the VCR and we'd watch the games, and I just kind of fell in love with baseball. I'm also really huge into hockey, but again, kind of mixing together that love of sports with my math and science background was kind of what got me interested in the data analytics and kind of starting my account. And I'm very grateful for having my account grow to the size it's been. And again, there's a lot of different people reach out to me and talk to, especially the guys here. They reached out to me last week, and of course, I was ecstatic to come join and talk about baseball.
Yeah, you're gonna fit well in here. Going by a name or going by a weird name that people call you, and not even thinking anything of it. Everybody calls me Sheep, and I don't even think about it. And also fit with Chris being a frustrated Toronto Blue Jays fan.
I think I would, it's been 30 years since they won the World Series, so I would set the over-under for the next one at 30 and a half, just based on the current state of the organization and future outlook. But we can do a part two all about that. I got hours and hours worth of gripes and grievances for them.
All right. So, and if you're interested in more of Thomas's stuff, he does have a Patreon, patreon.com/TJStats. If you're not already following this show on our Substack, it's stackingdingers.com. You'll get this, and we're working on our rankings to hopefully have our Underdog rankings out sometime in the early January. So that'll be distributed through there if you're interested. But tonight, we are going to dive into start at some basic level pitching stats, specifically talking about pitching tonight, and sort of work our way up into complexity things. So, Billy, we haven't talked to you yet. Let's start. Earn run average (ERA). It's kind of the number that has been used for a long time. So, what actually is it, and why don't we love it?
Yeah, so we'll go through this with all the stats that we're going to cover. So what it is and how we use it. So what is ERA? It's just the average runs a pitcher gives up across what would be 9 innings. If they pitch less than that, then that'll get extrapolated out over what would be 9 innings. So that's what you kind of is ERA. What it's used for, it is a very old school baseball statistic, which was commonly used incorrectly to which has been used to like how good is that pitcher for that period. What it misses is that ERA is really just based on what actually happened and not factoring in that luck is a component and not every baseball field is the same and each defense is going to be somewhat different. So it really is just a statistic based on what happened in that moment. And so that's why it is not a it's a old school stat that's a baseline for forever, but some of these newer data points are more meaningful. Yeah.
So, kind of, I guess the question then is, or don't we want to know what happened? If you say, ERA is what happened, why is that not necessarily what we care about, Thomas?
Yeah, specifically for ERA, Billy kind of covered it here. It's just a very noisy statistic. Specifically when we're looking at the pitcher level. You can consider ERA mostly to be like a team metric because once the ball goes into play, say a ground ball at third base, the pitcher really has no impact on it. Maybe you have a really good third baseman and make the play 9 times out of 10, maybe even more than that. But you can have a really bad third baseman and it'll go by them, or they just don't make the right play on the ball, but that now negatively affects the pitcher. Say if they allow an earned run on that play, or the batter that reached base ends up scoring. So again, it's just more of a noisy statistic that isn't very stable year to year. So again, one thing we like looking for, especially for fantasy, is kind of projecting and predicting the metrics we're interested in. And ERA, a very commonly used metric, basically every single fantasy format you could think of, using that as its own statistic to predict itself is not very it doesn't work as well. It's just not sticky year to year. A large factor in it is because BABIP, batting average of balls in play, isn't sticky from year to year. We definitely typically look at it for batters, but you can kind of look at it for pitchers as well. Sometimes a batter could have the best season in the career, but they can just get very lucky. Kind of the inverse for pitchers. A pitcher can get very lucky by allowing a very low batting average of balls in play. Of course, we can add in like some teams just have better defenses, or some teams just have better parks. But ERA specifically, though it does kind of tell you what's going on in the game, it's more kind of geared towards a team metric rather than the pitcher metric.
So, just even taking a further step back, when you're using this term "sticky," what does that mean to someone who might not have heard that before?
Yeah, so stickiness in statistics, it would just be kind of seeing how a stat would kind of stay steady or stick from year to year. So if say a pitcher has a 4 ERA in 2024, you probably wouldn't expect him to have a 4 ERA in 2025 unless you kind of factor in a lot of different variables, such as like their strikeout rate, their walk rate. But if you're looking specifically at ERA, since it is a noisy statistic, due to the function that it's basically a lot of it's explained by the batting average of balls in play, kind of just what happens when they allow these hits. It just gets a little murky down the line. So it's not a very reliable stat to use when you want to project or predict future performance. So that's why ERA itself is not a great indicator for a pitcher's true talent level.
So, Chris, then, if we're looking on our Fangraphs page, and we have the ERA stat, then right next to it is xERA. So the X is expected ERA. And would you like to describe xERA a little bit?
I guess the way when you can kind of think about these X statistics as a whole, it just stands for expected. So what we would have expected to happen given a certain set of events or a certain set of circumstances kind of leading up to a specific point in time. For xERA, what we're thinking about really is that point in time where you're kind of cutting off what happened versus what could happen is the moment that the bat hits the ball or doesn't hit the ball. So for xERA, kind of the noise that we talked about with ERA that you're trying to remove is everything after contact, essentially. So that batted ball luck, defense luck, park factor, those kind of things are like the first layer of stuff that you're trying to strip out from some of the noise in ERA. But everything leading up to that, pitch, what happens, strikeouts, walks, that kind of thing, stuff that the pitcher has a little more control over is one of the, I guess, layers of precision that you can add to ERA to get it a little bit closer to something that is predictive.
Okay, so when we're comparing those two numbers, they're what kind of things can we get out of comparing those two numbers?
Like just the ERA versus xERA?
Yeah, because it kind of has the same letters, so somebody would expect, I can take these two and it tells me something.
Right. So I think one of the first baseline leaps that people make when looking at those two statistics together is like if your, xERA was lower than your ERA for a year, that means you probably got unlucky. Or if your xERA was higher than your regular ERA, then maybe you got lucky for the year. Like the contact went the way that was good for you. You ball bounced the right way. You had a good defense, that kind of thing. That I would say is like the baseline level of kind of understanding of how those two interact. And I would say that, through a lot of other work that people do over statistics and pitching and everything else in baseball, we know that it's definitely not that simple.
Okay. Another stat that we see often, or I guess working your way down the Fangraphs chart a little bit, we get to something called FIP. So fielding independent pitching, a Tom Tango developed metric. If you want to learn more into some of the stat stuff, the book by Tom Tango is basically the only one I've read. So which is why I have these guys on here to talk about. But that's a great place to start, and you can start understanding some of this stuff. But Billy, why don't you take FIP and kind of explain it a little bit?
Yeah, so I think FIP is explained in just like its title. So fielding independent pitching. So what you're trying to do is extract the component that is the balls going into play. Those singles, doubles, triples get extracted out. So you're really focusing on the strikeouts, walks, hit by pitches, and then home runs. It's a different way to look at what has happened. So it gives us another clear picture on like some of the raw skills that the team is that the pitcher is showing.
Okay. Anyone else have anything on that?
I'll chime in with FIP
Yeah.
here. FIP, like as we were talking about with ERA before, FIP is actually a sticky statistic. You could say from year to year, pitchers tend to kind of replicate their FIP, and FIP is also a better predictor of future ERA than ERA is of itself. So since FIP is sticky from year to year, that a pitcher say has a 3.5 FIP in 2024, you could feasibly expect it to be around their next season. You can kind of use their FIP in kind of informing your projection or your prediction for 2025. So seeing how FIP and ERA are connected, of course, baseball is never that simple, and kind of extracting and getting rid of all those batted ball events will have a fair bit of information missing, especially if you're kind of predicting the future, because stuff like your home run rate or your ground ball rate is very important, and those tend to somehow stick from year to year. Some pitchers are just really good at inducing ground balls. But the reason why FIP is so useful, it's also very simple as well. It's just a linear equation. So it's simple to understand, and it also it aligns really well descriptively with ERA, and also helps predict future ERA, especially when we're looking in the fantasy baseball context, when we're trying to minimize your ERA, even though it's a bit trickier to do that.
Okay, so then I guess continuing on with that, we get, similar to an xERA, we have an xFIP, and what does that do in terms of, because the xERA had a pretty big factor. It's calculated pretty differently than ERA, but what about xFIP?
Yeah, so what xFIP does, it kind of stabilizes the pitcher's performance based on the league average home run rate, or at least home run per fly ball rate. So what it's basically saying is that over time, every pitcher should basically have the same home run to fly ball rate. Like no matter how many fly balls they're going to give up, they're going to have the same home run rate as every other pitcher in the league. Again, seems kind of unintuitive that case, but overall, you'll see that home run to fly ball ratio kind of does deviate a lot from year to year. And you'll see some pitchers have a really good year one season, like just like an ace pitcher, like Spencer Strider in 2022 had a phenomenal season, but in 2023 he just gave up a bunch of home runs. So like his performance just wasn't as great. Like his FIP was still good, but specifically his ERA just shot up because he was just giving up all these home runs. I think Nick Pivetta is a good example as well. He's a very home run prone pitcher. Some pitchers kind of have that tendency to give up those home runs. Nick Pivetta, he has the very over the top release. The pitch comes at a very steep angle, and he kind of keeps it at the top of the zone. So batters kind of just, if they see a fastball, they can just hit it over the fence. Same thing similar to what Joe Ryan was dealing with in 2023. So xFIP is trying to kind of eliminate that noise um, of that home run to fly ball ratio. It'll still kind of punish pitchers that give up a lot of fly balls, because fly balls in general are the only ways you're going to allow home runs. So it kind of just helps normalize it a bit. But and overall, it's kind of treats a pitcher more like just looking at their strikeouts and their walks, which is, I guess, their factoring is more important than their home run rate, which deviates kind of from a year-to-year basis, and they don't feel that it's that sticky.
Okay. And so now you kind of mentioned strikeouts and walks. I guess, Chris, you weren't here last week, but that was one of the quick cheat stats that Ryan specifically called out. So what actually is strikeouts minus walk, or what you'll hear a lot of people say is K minus BB percent, or something along those lines?
It is quite literally in the name. It's just your strikeout rate minus your walk rate. So what percentage of batters do you strike out minus what percentage of batters do you walk? And kind of the bigger that gap is, we kind of equate that. We've seen through people's research that that is a sticky skill-based statistic, which can be a good predictor of your future strikeouts, your future walks, and your future just overall success. But it is just those two kind of skills. It is your strikeout ability and your walk suppression. And I think that there was definitely a time where people leaned more heavily on strikeout to walk ratio as kind of the first iteration of this. And I don't know who to credit as kind of being the first person to really start hammering that it was the K minus BB is kind of the way to really approach that relationship. But the ratio part of it wasn't quite doing the best job in quantifying, and isolating for that skill set. And we've kind of landed on, I think, as a group, this strikeout minus walk is kind of being the right way to evaluate those two skills in conjunction.
So, I mean, is there a bad thing using that by itself? Or I guess if somebody is already listening to this and has tuned out, I guess maybe this is an open question. Anybody, out of these things that we've sort of talked about so far, what's the simplest way to look at one or two of these and trying to, get a feel for a pitcher?
I think the K minus walk percentage is just the simplest thing you can understand. Again, as Chris was mentioning, it's just the subtraction of their strikeouts and their walks, and how often they would do that. And I guess circling back to the point about strikeout to walk ratio, I don't particularly like on Fangraphs. That's what it shows. First, it doesn't really look at the percentage there. The reason why your strikeout to walk ratio is kind of not as indicative, even though it is fairly strong, it's that it weighs walks a lot more than they typically should have. Say if you have 10 strikeouts and 1 walk versus 10 strikeouts and 2 walks, the metrics basically telling you that that 1 walk is worth twice as much, or like your that 10 to 5, it's like the ratio is twice as much. Well, in actuality, it's very close. It's very similar. So that's why looking at the percentage is definitely more, both more intuitive and also just kind of gauges the skill of the pitcher better. So again, strikeouts minus walk percentage, very simple metric to understand, and it kind of creates the basis for all these other metrics we are kind of discussing: FIP, xFIP. Of course, it's not like the main component of xERA, which is kind of the inverse of expected WOBA, but still, strikeouts and walks are under the pitcher's control basically at all times. So if you can isolate that, and most of the time it's like 40% of a pitcher's plate appearances end in either a strikeout or a walk. So again, we can get a lot of information from them, and there's essentially very little noise in that regard there, because over a whole season sample, strikeout rate and walk rate tend to stabilize fairly early on, rather than something like your batting average of balls in play or kind of like your home run rate.
Excellent. So moving on, taking it to the next sort of level. Now we're getting into like the area where I start to glaze over, if I'm being perfectly honest. There's something we hear about called stuff. So this is a metric, I don't know, in the last couple of years, I feel like has really come to the forefront. I'm sure it's been around longer. But one of the benefits of having Thomas on tonight is he has his own version of stuff. It has some other names, but basically it's a pitch metric sort of indicator. So, Thomas, what is stuff? If somebody has no idea what that means, they see these numbers and hear about it. What is that to you?
Yeah, so a stuff model, as Matthew was mentioning, it's kind of a way to evaluate the effectiveness of a pitch. So when you think of stuff, I think it's aptly named by Saris. Think of a pitcher's stuff. It's kind of just like how nasty these pitches are, and instead of looking at kind of like where the pitches are going or where they're locating them, it specifically isolates the pitch shape itself. So everything relating to the shape of a pitch, such as its velocity, its spin rate, its horizontal, its vertical movement. Sometimes you even look at the deviations between different pitch types, or like how a pitcher's fastball and their changeup, that kind of vertical separation. So there's a bunch of different factors that are mostly within the pitcher's control. So a pitcher can typically replicate their fastball shape pretty consistently. But rather, Command, on the other hand, Max Bay did a great post about this a few months back. Currently, now he works with the Dodgers. Very brilliant mind. Just how tight kind of that range for getting a strike is. Like, you're throwing a ball 60 feet 6 inches. I know pitchers are kind of cheating by going down, reaching like 7 feet, 7.5 feet down, but you're able to hit a pretty small spot consistently. You have a very small, like, even like a slight degree, it'll change completely. So the reason why we like to look at stuff is because pitchers can kind of control what they're doing, or even like on a whim, they can add in a new pitch or change up a grip and whatnot, and we can kind of get a pretty good sense of how that pitch will perform in the future, because they're just kind of looking at it. There's different, like how effective a fastball is. Of course, harder fastballs are better. You can hit 100 miles per hour. You're top of the class basically. But then you can take a look at different factors of that fastball, see how the spin rate affects it, or the spin efficiency, or just to see how the vertical break on the pitch. Typically, you want fastballs that are flatter rather than steeper. The flatter fastballs kind of add that layer of deception that batters don't really tend to see. Kind of counters the effects of gravity due to its backspin. So yeah, so stuff again. It's a pitch model. It's a I guess a model that kind of evaluates a pitch's effectiveness, and what you would typically see as the output of the model. So the input is all that stuff relating to its shape. Its output, specifically for my model and many others, it's kind of the expected run value of a pitch. So something like a strikeout is worth how many runs. It's a positive event for the pitcher versus a home run, which of course is a very negative event for the pitcher. So it kind of gets all the pitches. My model specifically is trained off of 2021 to 2023 data. So it just trains off all that data, looks at all the pitch shapes and kind of the results that came from them. And then what we can do, we end up with a model there that we can now predict future kind of metrics or future effectiveness of different pitches. So even when a new pitcher kind of pops up, you hear rookies like Jackson Jobe or Andrew Painter, we can kind of get a pretty quick understanding of how their stuff would perform at the major league level. And the beauty of stuff is that it stabilizes very quickly. Like within 10 pitches, you'll probably get a pretty good understanding. Typically, you want to get around 100. But at that point, it's like, yeah, we kind of know what this pitcher is doing, and then we can kind of dig a bit deeper and see like how can they utilize their arsenal. Where are they locating their pitches? Is there a specific reason why they're struggling, or a specific reason why they're doing really well with a pitch that may not grade out at that same level? So again, all in all, a stuff model is just a way to kind of evaluate the effectiveness of a pitch. And when you're watching baseball and you kind of see like, damn, that was a nice pitch, it probably has a good stuff plus.
I'm curious, Billy, you are a few years removed from playing a little bit of college baseball. How prevalent was this even talk? Well, I don't know. Was it even an inkling of an idea at that point when you were deep in it?
No, well, I'm 31, so I don't. It may have been at the higher levels than I was, but not. I don't think that we. I remember writing an article or a paper for and using our data for our baseball team data, and it was nothing in this stratosphere. But the thing that I think that is most interesting about stuff is growing up, you always played guys, and he throws 90, he throws 90, but it's not the same 90 of the way that the ball comes out of their hand. You ever hear someone, oh, the ball just jumps out of their hand? That's what we're trying to quantify here is based on, okay, the velocity, the spin characteristics of what's happening. Are they truly on top of the ball? Are they around the ball a little bit? What's actually happening? And you get a better picture than just 90 miles an hour. You get a numeric that gives better context to like what that guy actually is producing on the mound, rather than just raw like velocity, because velocity is always a component.
What made you? Maybe it's just curiosity, or what Tom? Maybe you thought something was being done wrong, but what made you want to come up with your own version?
I think it was mostly curiosity and just kind of a challenge for me to do because I just wanted to work on some machine learning. Because again, I was when I first started, it was mostly I was just doing data visualization and kind of just analysis. I kind of always wanted to kind of dig a bit deeper into it, and I'm from modeling and researching and everything. I think I've become a smarter baseball fan, a better analyst, and kind of just understand kind of the nuances of pitching more because again now since I'm like I used to pretty much when I saw stuff models I'm like, oh, if this picture has really good stuff I might just kind of believe it fully and read into it more. But again, there's so much more to pitching than it is just their raw kind of stuff, or you can kind of call it their talent, their way they kind of um, throw their pitches. But again, there's so many other aspects of it that I think I've become a bit more aware to and more kind of like keen into it when I'm uh, kind of evaluating a pitcher or understanding where they're struggling. Because again, command is you could say just as important or even more important than stuff. But stuff kind of builds that foundation for a pitcher that maybe there's something you can tweak in them. Maybe their delivery or something can help kind of fix up their command. But if a pitcher has kind of that raw, innate stuff, it's a very good foundation for them to be an effective pitcher. Maybe not a starter, but even like a relief pitcher. Because again, you have pitchers like Michael Kopech, Michel Otonez from Oakland. Like they just have really fantastic stuff. Sometimes they struggle with their command, but they're able to be very effective in those shorter outings because again, when you're a relief pitcher, the walks don't matter as much, especially when you're striking out basically half the guys you're seeing.
So I guess that leads me to I'll put this question to anyone. Let's take an example here. We had Bobby Miller last year, whose stuff numbers, at least apologies, Thomas, I don't know his numbers within your system, but one of the selling points last year on drafting him was how well he had like 5 good stuff pitches on Eno's model. So what happened there? Maybe not specifically him, but what is, what can happen outside of the stuff numbers that might, make even if they've got a good pitch, that they're not a great pitcher yet.
Yeah, with Bobby Miller specifically, I guess it was a mix of injuries. Was one thing. His stuff did kind of decline, but funnily enough, you could probably see it again. His stuff was still pretty good last season, just not that same level as 2023. And I kind of bought into Bobby Miller because he kind of showed solid command with, again, 5 fantastic pitches. So it's, again, a really good foundation, especially with a team like the Dodgers, who are known for their player development and kind of just getting the best out of their prospects. What happened with Bobby Miller last year with the combination of injuries, and it may have just been some confidence issues. It seemed like he couldn't just locate the ball, or whenever he got in a rut, it just kept going down. Specifically, his fastball following injury, there was definitely a large decline in stuff. It kind of ticked up near the end. But again, there was just so many kind of under the hood issues. Couldn't locate anything really. None of his secondaries were really all that effective. And he was just getting hit really hard. So again, command just really wasn't there for Bobby Miller last season. Even though his walk rate wasn't too high, his strikeout rate plummeted. So there must have been something with his mechanics. Maybe he was tipping pitches. I haven't heard any news on that, but he just wasn't consistent. Even like from inning to inning, he'd just have some blow up starts. He had one, I think it was like 1 or 2 decent starts on the season, but nothing kind of that like knocked your socks off. But yeah, Bobby Miller, he's a pretty, I wouldn't say rare case. It's just like a case where the stuff doesn't really connect to the performance. And then again, there's so many other things. Again, these pitchers, they're human after all, so they're bound to make mistakes, and just something could go wrong mentally, physically, just something that just wasn't panning out for Miller last season.
So what I'm hearing is we're off the hook for last year's bad Bobby Miller, because legally none of us are allowed to, guilty as charged, to comment on, Bobby Miller's 2024 presumed success. But I'm going to go with process was sound, and we just got unlucky. So maybe in a couple of years we'll revisit this discourse. But for now, settled, we're good. We can move on from Bobby Miller in 2024.
Okay. Yeah. I've scrolled past his name looking for that last pitcher on my roster, but I've not had the confidence to pick him. But I guess that's also somewhat due to the clog. I don't know exactly what kind of even playing time he has potentially there in the Dodgers system right now. All right. So let's move on. Oh, actually, I guess I had one more question that someone might be a little bit confused on, Thomas. You said the output is an expected run value, but when we a lot of time when we see this pitcher's fastball has X number for their stuff, it's like, 103. What does 103 actually mean when someone sees that as a stuff number?
Yeah, that's a very good point. There are some metrics. I know Baseball Prospectus, their kind of Stuff Pro model, they actually outputted in expected run value. So that kind of, again, in that case, it's a bit confusing, I'd say, especially for just maybe a casual fan, or even just like I wasn't really familiar what expected run value is until I kind of read a bit into it. But expected run value is basically kind of just the expected run value of an event, like a strikeout, a home run, a single, or whatnot. Um, but specifically when you see like 103 stuff plus, in my model, I have an average of 100 and then a standard deviation of 10. So when you see 103 stuff plus in my model, that'll be, I guess, extrapolating outwards, you'll see 0.3 standard deviations above the mean. It's a normal distribution, so again, 0.3 standard deviations above the mean isn't too much. It's maybe like the 60th percentile of a pitcher. But as you kind of get closer to those ends there, when you see like 110, that gets closer to like the 85th percentile, or 120, that's like the 95th percentile. So again, it's kind of just normalizing everything. I guess people that are more familiar with statistics, they would be more kind of just know more about the normal distribution and whatnot. But it's kind of like the bell curve. I guess when we were all in school, people would talk about the bell curve and kind of see that distribution there, kind of where that pitcher lands on that bell curve. So above 100 would be above average, and below 100 would be below average. And then it kind of follows through with kind of where you place them based on their scores. So it's just a way to normalize and more contextualize a pitcher, rather than just looking at their expected run value. Because at sometimes you'd be like, what does negative 0.1 expected run value mean?
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's pop out here and let's take a look at one of your graphics that you present on, over at TJStats. We'll see a lot of these. I know you do some, season summaries as well as individual games. You'll do breakdowns, but I'll just throw it to you. Where do we start looking at a TJStats graphic like this?
Yeah, I guess the first part, the top, it's all the biographical information of the specific pitcher at hand here. So this is Bryce Miller. He's one of my favorite pitchers. I loved him when he got called up in 2023. I didn't have the best 2023 season, but there was kind of that foundation. I added that splitter in and had a phenomenal 2024. I'd like to note that he does follow me on Twitter, so that's I'm pretty proud of that. And he had a fantastic season. So
Those have to be related. Yeah.
They must be. So specifically,
Clearly a smart guy.
But yeah, it's great. I guess I'll make a tangent here. There are some pitchers that do follow me, like Tariq Skubal also follows me. And it's just like they love this stuff. They love the data. They just want to get better. And it's kind of telling that some of the best pitchers in baseball are using this like similar data, or like seeking out data just to improve and kind of understand how their arsenal kind of fits in, how their pitches work together. And I just find that to be great. Like a data analyst, a lot more work for me. Which I guess everyone's interested. Baseball, the hype for baseball data is not going to die, especially when the players themselves are kind of seeking out for it. Let's get back to this graphic here. Bryce Miller. Just getting some biographical information, the handedness, his age, his height, his weight. Nothing too important, specifically for the graphic. But as we kind of move down, we get kind of a summary. If it was a game summary, it'll show a little bit different data rather than its ERA. It'll show like his earned runs, or like instead of the strikeout percentage, it'll show the strikeouts. But specifically, this is his season summary, his 2024 season summary. So we'll just go over. This is from Fangraphs. So Whatever you see on Fangraphs, you'll see here in that table on the top. But when we kind of move further down, we get more granular and look more at his pitches and his different pitch types. So the first one, very similar to what you would see on Baseball Savant, is just his pitch velocity distribution. Kind of seeing how how fast he's throwing his pitches, and then compared to kind of the league average as well. So again, he throws mid 90s, and then he's a bunch of different secondaries, which I love to see. Just having that very deep arsenal kind of adds that extra layer of deception and just a bunch of different pitches in his toolkit. The next plot moving over is his rolling TJ Stuff Plus. So that's kind of his how his TJ Stuff Plus has kind of transitioned over the year. You'll see some peaks and valleys here and there. Typically, those would be on a game-to-game basis. Say he throws like 40 or 50 fastballs a game. Typically throughout the game, they'll decline. But as you can see, his stuff kind of went up near the end. So that may be indicative. Maybe he changed something in September that made his Stuff Plus kind of tick up near the end. So again, that's just kind of looking at different trends. I can change that rolling number to make it be 100 or 250 just to kind of maybe instead of see all those peaks and valleys, we can maybe see a smoother trend. But again, the next plot is kind of I'd say the most important one to understanding at least the basis of stuff. It's kind of the pitch breaks or the pitch movements. It's a short form movement plot. So on the x-axis, we have the horizontal break. So that is how much the pitch is going to move, basically left to right. Typically, fastballs, changeups, sinkers, splitters, they're going to move to the pitcher's arm side, while all other pitches, breaking balls, will typically move to the pitcher's glove side. So when you see a sweeper, when it kind of starts in the right, or like releasing the ball, and then it kind of sweeps over to the left, that's basically what this plot is telling you. His sweeper, on average, gets around 15 inches of horizontal break. So that means it kind of moves 15 inches from where, like, what you want to look at for this plot specifically is think of you're throwing a football. When you throw a football, the pitch itself, the ball itself is spiraling. So it doesn't really get impacted by the effects of spin much, because again, it's basically called bullet spin. So it's not going to go swing side to side. It's not going to move up and down. It'll just kind of go with how gravity will make it go. So that 0-0 spot is bullet spin. Everything around it is kind of how the pitcher, like how his grip's affecting it, the spin rate, kind of the axis of the pitch is causing the pitches to move the way it is. What's a little not intuitive about this plot is you see pitches that have above 0 vertical movement. You'll think pitches, they can't really go up because gravity exists, but what this is, it's called induced vertical break. So it's essentially the movement imparted by the pitcher that kind of think gravity didn't exist for a second, or kind of see how it counters gravity. I guess that's a better way. Kind of how it counters gravity. So his fastball is 18 inches of induced vertical break. It's one of the best fastballs in the league. It has a very good TJ Stuff Plus grade. And he's able to generate that due to high spin and the axis he throws it on. He's able to get 18 inches. So instead of say say you're throwing a football, same velocity and everything, this pitch will drop 18 inches less, I guess. The bullet would be 8. Like if you threw two pitches the exact same way at the exact same spot, the bullet would be 18 inches below that fastball. So it's kind of more helping contextualize what this plot actually means, and it kind of just looks like a canvas and an art piece. Specifically for Bryce Miller, there's just so many different colors, but hopefully that kind of helped understand what that pitch movement is. It's essentially just looking at how the pitch moves, related to if everything was just like straight lines, basically.
Okay. Before we move on to the table, anybody have any questions on those sections so far?
Not a question, but a comment. That pitch breaks quadrant section is super important, like Thomas said, just understanding how pitchers throw the ball and where it moves. And I think one of the things that clicked for me hearing once upon a time a while ago is just about, Eno was always really big on, if you have great fastball with great stuff on your fastball, like what does that actually mean? And I think Bryce Miller is a great example of actually showing that. It's like, okay, it's not just, like Thomas said, the gun bullet spin right down the middle. It just goes flat and straight. Like guys with great fastballs are getting movement on that fastball at a very high velocity. And like this way of breaking it out on kind of the 2D plot where the ball ends up relative to everything else shows how, pitches play off each other and work together to form kind of the pitcher's final arsenal, but what like a great quality, like the characteristics of a great fastball or a great breaking ball, like what that actually means for a pitcher and how it works.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's so right that's like the plot, and it's like it's so wild to see that like how kind of like tightly banded some of these are, because that bullet slider that he's throwing is very clearly a different shape than that sweeper that he's throwing. He's got changeups and splitters, and he's got it looks like multiple different fastballs in there too. One with significantly more run on it, and he's using these all very intentionally. And this kind of data goes to prove that. I'm really curious: do you see pitchers? Are you doing analytics around like their changes in their pitch arsenal throughout the season as well? And what are your thoughts on like pitchers in season changes? I know it's not maybe a tangent, but it's kind of what I'm bringing up.
I think Bryce Miller is a great example of making kind of in season changes. Specifically, his knuckle curveball. It's aptly named the death ball. I think that Tread Athletics called it that. I wrote a whole article on Bryce Miller. I could talk about it for days. But back in about June, like he started phenomenal this year. He had that splitter. His April was really strong. He fell out of a pretty good May, but June he just couldn't get anyone out. It seemed like no one was kind of biting on that splitter anymore, and he kind of fell back into that pattern of his fastball, leaning on his fastball a bit too much, and it getting hit really hard like it did in 2023. But in July, or I guess the end of June, I think it was June 30th, he added in this knuckle curveball. And the characteristics of it, it's mid 80s pitch, and doesn't have as much depth as a typical curveball, but it also doesn't have much horizontal movement. You can kind of see that on the pitch movement plot there. It kind of just lives kind of 6 to 10 inches below the zero line there, which is kind of that death ball classification, and it returned great results. It kind of just fleshed out his arsenal, brought back that effectiveness of his fastball and splitter, just working hand in hand. He made a comment saying that he wanted a pitch that kind of looked like his four seam, but it just fell off the table. It just dropped. So just like his curveball did. So his fastball and his curveball again don't have too much arm side movement. So when they're coming at you, one would, if you say face one back to back, one pitch would go basically flat like a bullet towards you, like flat because of how much ride he gets on the pitch. While the curveball, while not as fast as his fastball, would kind of look similar, but then just drop about maybe 2 feet, even more compared to his fastball. So again, adding in different pitches is definitely something that I haven't really done much analysis on, but I definitely know places like Driveline and Tread, they definitely have models and whatnot, like how adding a specific pitch will kind of help round out your arsenal or like clean up your mix a bit. But yeah, Bryce Miller is a great example of that. You see pitchers typically add pitches at the beginning of the year, but adding them throughout the season is also very effective method. I know Adrian Morgan, I wrote an article about him too. I think he kind of added more of his splitter in about June, and again, he had his best season of his career. So again, there's just so many different aspects of pitching, and just getting that edge, no matter what, over the batter is very important. Whether it be changing even one of your existing pitches a little bit with a different grip, or just adding a new pitch, because like I'm sure when they saw that curveball the first time, the batters were like, "What the hell is this?" This came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting struggle as you know, fantasy baseball players um, in the off season, hearing about all the changes that someone might be making, or even if we don't know the changes, we're hearing they're going to drive line. So I'm interested in what's your take on as these things become more and more prevalent, like in the off season. How do you, or maybe how do you think we can take that information and just and apply it into the next year?
Yeah, specifically with like driveline or tread, they're kind of at the forefront of kind of baseball training and whatnot. Very public side. I would expect teams to have similar kind of training facilities and whatnot, but maybe the players just prefer working with a specific trainer that they maybe worked with in college or something. So yeah, nothing against them for going out of their way, or maybe if you're on vacation or something. Again, it's their winter break basically. But yeah, looking at different pictures, I don't think Bryce Miller specifically went to Driveline, but he was working out at his college basically during um, basically the whole off season. We saw Adrian Morgan; he was working with the San Diego Padres pitching coach. So it's not like they're all going to Driveline. I think all these pictures are trying to just all right, players in general just trying to get better. Of course, you'll see players just relaxing, which is perfectly fine. They've just played 162 games. They can do whatever they want. I don't really care. But again, they're always trying to get better, and they're utilizing data such as the guys at MLB.com graciously provide publicly for free, and that I'm able to kind of build my brand off of it and help inform other people. So, again, I know people have their running list of who went to Driveline, who went to Tread. I think it's all pretty informative, but at the same time, we don't really know what's going on in those training sessions or what specifically they're focusing on. Bryce Miller was a more of a rarer example. He was kind of documenting everything himself on Twitter. Like he was sharing like his splitter, like where it was going, what else he was working on. So again, it's a little tricky until you kind of see it working out in game action. Because again, that time they're not really playing against anyone, you can't really gauge the effectiveness. But again, if you're seeing a pitcher that's utilizing data and like being very open about it, it's probably a pretty good sign that they're trying their best to improve and kind of reaching that next level.
I guess anything specifically on the bottom that you wanted to highlight that I interrupted you on?
Yeah, so the bottom here is basically the components of stuff, I guess, the most common components of stuff you typically see. Also, just metrics specifically to the picture itself. So, it kind of looks at its velocity and the IVB and the HBs, that's the induced vertical brake and the horizontal brake. That kind of directly relates to the pitch brake plow we saw. Those are just the averages. So these are just the averages. It kind of gives you a sense of just the pitcher's pitch. Again, they're not all going to be thrown this exact same, uh, all these exact same characteristics, but it helps kind of understand like why is Bryce Miller's fastball so effective, or why does he have that 107 TJ stuff plus or 64 grade. Digging a little deeper, you can see again. Chris was mentioning just how important that movement plot is. So um, Bryce Miller has a mid 90s fastball, again, above average velocity, but he's able to get good amount of ride on it, 18 inches. Um, and then you can also kind of tie that into his release point. Typically, when you look at release points, if you're throwing from a higher slot, you'll typically get more induced vertical break. That's just how the relationship works. But Bryce Miller is able to generate a lot of ride on his fastball thanks to his ability to impart backspin on it from a fairly low slot. So again, he kind of gets that very flat angle. So that's what VAA is. That's the vertical approach angle. So he gets like a kind of that flatter angle. So when it goes through the top of the zone, batters thinking it's going to drop, but since he's able to kind of keep that ride on the pitch, he'll just swing right under it. So we'll see kind of the best pitchers in the league have fastballs similar to Bryce Miller's. Again, you have people like Spencer Strider, Michael Kopech, Jacob DeGrom. They have kind of those like elite fastballs. But Bryce Miller has that same kind of shape, but just a little less in some of the aspects. So again, the table at the bottom kind of gives you a sense of what's kind of being built into the grades. And then the last 4 columns are just kind of the results of the pitch had this season.
Random question. You're talking about the fastball shape. One of the things, the few knocks on Paul Skeens going to last year was there was some people that didn't like his fastball shape. So is that it doesn't fit that mold that you're talking about? The Bryce Miller type of fastball shape is, and how does that come out in your stuff model specifically for Skeens?
Yes, for Skeens, the discourse about his fastball, I think it was just like propaganda from Cubs fans, not because Pirates got their number 1 pick and selected Skeens. Skeens' fastball, Lance Brzezowski had a phenomenal video on this, like 4 aspects of a fastball that you like just the 4 aspects of a fastball. One was velocity, extension, it was deception, and then it was like shape. So the deception was more like the release point and whatnot. So specifically for Paul Skeens, he had elite velocity, is about average extension. The shape again wasn't too great. It kind of had some tailing action on it, and again overblown because he's throwing 101 miles an hour in like the 6th inning. It doesn't really matter how kind of bad the shape is. At a certain point, velocity is just going to end up winning. But Skeens also had a very kind of unique release point. Very tall dude, but he was able to kind of get that lower release on his fastball. So again, you can't just specifically look at the shape itself or like just the movement itself. Sometimes for fastballs, it will kind of dictate a lot about the pitch. But I guess Brian Wu's a really good example as well. If you look at his shape, it's not good. It's isolating his shape. It has like 13 inches of induced vertical break, which is well below average. But when you consider that he throws from the kind of the lowest release point out of any pitcher in baseball, like under 5 feet, like he is throwing like really low. He's able to get a really flat action on that fastball, making it return very great results. Brian Wu had a really good season. So again, there's a lot of stuff you have to consider when looking at kind of the pitch, the shapes, its velocities, and the stuff grade tries to kind of simplify or kind of like round it all up into one number. But even then, there's something that may not be caught. Like Bryce Miller's splitter is a good example as well. It has 100 TJ stuff plus 101, but it returned one of the best. It was like plus 10 runs this year. It was one of the best splitters in baseball. By its shape, again, there wasn't really anything too special about it. Mid 80s. It had like its shape was good. It was about average for it, but then you have to consider what a splitter is actually doing compared to the fastball. Like a splitter was a really good weapon to left-handed hitters, and the way it kind of breaks and moves away from left-handed hitters is very effective. Which again doesn't really be captured in this tough model that well, but in actuality it works. So again, you have to sometimes take the stuff with a grain of salt. But in general, it kind of gives a good understanding of how a pitch works, or like, is this pitch kind of good, like in isolation?
All right. Any other questions you guys have on anything here?
It's not necessarily about here, but I guess so. If a pitcher has poor stuff, but they have done well in the past, is that an indicator that they're like is little room for error in their like approach? Because if their like extra thing that made them so successful goes, they're working with lesser stuff. Is that like a fair assumption?
Yeah, in most parts, I would say. I guess a good example is Matthew Boyd. I guess he's now on the Cubs. His stuff is not really great. Again, you can kind of see it from the metrics, like very low velocity, um, and like he has I think he has a bullet slider that is like sits in the low 80s, high 70s, which again is well below the average bullet slider there. But he had really good results last season and was pretty solid in the playoffs. But again, he has that lefty release, so he has that added deception. I guess the way he hides the ball, and he just is able to command it well. And his changeup is a great offering against right-handed hitters. But again, yeah, if he kind of falters a bit, it's not really gonna be like if the command kind of deviates and isn't consistent, he may be prone to just getting lit up. But on the other hand, you have a pitcher, say, Screwball. Again, his stuff doesn't grade out too well in my model, but I know he's just phenomenal. Like he has those 5 pitches, and he commands it really well, and he's able to hit 100 miles per hour. Like he has kind of more room for that error, just because, again, the nature of his arsenal and the way he kind of commands it and utilizes it, rather than a pitcher that has kind of a shallow arsenal and just not doesn't have that overpowering stuff that we'd see pitchers like DeGrom or even like Chris Sale have.
Awesome.
All right. So for everyone that's now sat through all the math and all the talk, we're gonna reward those that stuck through it all. We need some players, some guys that you've looked at, Thomas, and some guys that you're looking at for this season to maybe you have a breakout or a major improvement.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say Bobby Miller. I don't even know if he'll be. I don't even know if he'll be in the league playing this year. He'll probably, if there's an injury or something, he'll make it up. I would be a little interested, just because his stuff did kind of stay pretty strong. But again, I'm gonna pass on Bobby Miller. I think you mentioned David Festa isn't in the player pool right now.
Yeah, we can work on that for the next contest, but this early contest,
okay,
we're missing him.
As a tidbit, David Festa, if you can get him in the future sometime, you should get him. But other guys that I've been interested in, Jose Soriano from the Los Angeles Angels. He had a pretty good season last year. Unfortunately, he had an injury. I think it was around July or whatnot, and then I think he made a few starts near the end of the season. But again, the stuff was phenomenal. High 90s sinker and a really good knuckle curveball. It was like the hardest curveball by 5 miles an hour. It was nuts how hard this guy was throwing his curveball, and it returned fantastic results. So I'm a guest writer on the FTN draft guide, which is releasing tomorrow, and I kind of highlight Jose Soriano specifically because I kind of created my own very simple kind of projection model, and he did pretty well for pitchers that were getting drafted fairly late. But yeah, his sinker was really good last year. His curveball, excellent stuff. I'm very kind of in on Jose Soriano. He should have kind of that spot in Los Angeles for next year. Their rotation doesn't seem to be too set in stone. They did add Kikuchi. I think they have Hendricks as well, which was I'm not sure why they got him, but they have I think he has kind of that path. Again, the wins might be a little tougher to come by. I don't think he's going to throw too many innings. But again, the stuff is there. I think the strikeouts will tick up, and he showed kind of improved command last season. Another pitcher, he's not really a tough guy. It's Joey Cantillo from the Guardians. His fastball, again, it's that point is like there's some pitchers that just don't have a strong fastball but have really good kind of secondaries, and Cantillo is one of those guys. And another good aspect of Cantillo, he has very good extension, so he's able to get down on the mound basically further than anyone else, like Logan Gilbert level of extension. A really good changeup, solid slider. So I think he's going really late. in drafts. So it would be, I think he's a pretty good target for this season, especially in Cleveland.
That's another name we'll have to get added to the player pool.
Okay, so he hasn't been added yet, but again, Coutinho is interesting.
I'll add him on my.
Braxton Garrett is in the player pool. He's been unfortunately injured a lot last season, but he did show pretty good command. And again, he has that kind of 6-pitch arsenal. He had a really strong 2023 season. I was kind of, when I saw him, was reviewing him during 2023. I kept saying that no way this continues, just because like the stuff just wasn't there. But he's able to kind of command the zone really well, have those 6 pitches. Great. Again, looking back, just looking at his strikeout to walk ratio, he was good last year when he was healthy, but again, he's a pretty good option. I think he kind of fell to the wayside with his injury woes and whatnot. But again, Miami, I think Alcantara should be back near the start of the season, but Yuri Perez, I'm not sure if he's going to be there. So again, there's some should be some openings in the rotation, especially with Luzardo on the trade block and everything. But yeah, Garrett seems to be a pretty good late round addition, especially if you're looking for volume. He should definitely give you volume. Plays in a great home park. I guess one thing that sometimes I even forget about is looking at pitchers' parks when kind of evaluating and predicting them, which I guess is a good reason why you could look at Seattle pitchers, just because Seattle's park is amongst the best for pitchers. You can kind of see that in the splits as well for them. But yeah, again, just a handful of pitchers that I like. Even just looking at Stuff's Stuff model, you can kind of just tinker around and see which pitchers have really good stuff and kind of just dig a little deeper into them. There's a bunch of relief pitchers that I like, but I believe best ball, you don't really deal with those, right?
And not in our format, no.
So yeah, so if there's any relief pitchers kind of out of the woodworks you hear that they're going to start, like Clay Holmes or Jeff Hoffman, those guys would definitely be pretty interesting, especially seeing how their kind of elite rate stats translate to being starters. We saw Michael King, Garrett Crochet do really well with that. Seth Lugo was another pretty good, I guess, from 2023 was a really good example of kind of making that jump from relieving to starting and kind of flourishing as well.
Okay, excellent. That's a lot of list of names for people to dig in a little bit more, like you said. So that brings us to the close here tonight. We might not have a show the next couple of weeks with the holidays. We don't know for sure, but as I said, in the future, we are looking to, at the beginning of January, put out our rankings for the first time, and that's for sure. You'll be getting a show on that when we release those. But everybody, it was great to have you here this evening. Thank you for watching. Special thanks, Thomas, for joining. Again, find him on the internet at TJStats, patreon.com/TJStats. And if you're not subscribed, if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, do it. Let's get to 500 before the end of the draft season. I'm saying that now. That's our goal. So let's get us up there. So for Billy, Chris, and Thomas, and myself, everyone, thank you for watching.